Why do men cheat? Is it because they're unhappy? Is it because they're bored? Or is it something deeper, something wired into human psychology that most people don't understand? Before you jump to conclusions, take a moment to hear this out, because by the end of this video, you won't just understand why men cheat. You'll understand how to recognize the signs, protect your heart, and regain your power in any relationship. Stay till the end, because knowing this truth will change the way you see men forever. Let's start with the hard truth. Most people think cheating is just about physical attraction. It's not. It's about something much bigger. It's about needs, psychological, emotional, and even biological. When a man cheats, he's not just betraying his partner. He's revealing a weakness within himself. Cheating is not always about dissatisfaction with a relationship. In fact, many men who cheat actually love their partners. But love isn't always enough to stop them. Why? Because cheating is often about an internal struggle, one that has nothing to do with the woman they're with and everything to do with the void they feel inside. One of the biggest reasons men cheat is validation. Every human being craves validation, but for some men, it becomes an obsession. They need to feel wanted, admired, and desired, not just by one person, but by many. Their ego thrives on attention. When they feel like they're not getting enough of it in their relationship, they look for it elsewhere. Not because their partner is lacking, but because their self-worth is fragile. Here's where psychology comes in. The brain rewards novelty. When something is new, exciting, and unpredictable, dopamine, the pleasure chemical, floods the system. This is why people get addicted to gambling, social media, and yes, cheating. The rush of something new makes them feel alive. But like any addiction, the high doesn't last. And when it fades, they're left with nothing but regret. But let's go even deeper. Some men cheat not because they're looking for pleasure, but because they're running from something. Fear of intimacy, fear of commitment, fear of being fully seen. The moment a relationship becomes too deep, too real, too vulnerable, they panic. Instead of facing their fears, they escape. And they escape into something shallow, something temporary. Then there's the issue of power. Some men cheat simply because they can. They see it as a game, a conquest, a way to prove their dominance. In their mind, having options makes them powerful. But here's the real truth. Real power isn't in having multiple women. Real power is in having discipline. A weak man follows his impulses. A strong man controls them. But here's the real tragedy. Most men who cheat don't even realize what they're destroying. In chasing temporary pleasure, they lose something far more valuable: trust, respect, and true emotional connection. Because in the end, it's not just about infidelity, it's about self-worth. A man who constantly seeks external validation is a man who doesn't truly know his own value. And that's the real issue. So, what's the lesson here? If you've ever been cheated on, understand this. It was never about you. It was never about what you lacked. It was about what he lacked. His self-restraint, his maturity, his ability to appreciate real love. And if you're a man watching this, understand one thing. Self-discipline is the highest form of self-respect. Cheating doesn't make you powerful. Loyalty does. And this is just the beginning. Because if you really want to understand the deep psychology behind why men cheat, keep watching. The truth gets even darker. But with knowledge comes power. And once you understand the game, you'll never be played again. If cheating isn't always about love or attraction, then what is it really about? The answer lies in one powerful word: validation. Every human being craves validation. It's hardwired into us from birth. As children, we look to our parents for approval. As we grow, we seek acceptance from friends, teachers, and society. But for some men, this need for validation becomes an endless hunger, one that no single person can ever satisfy. For these men, cheating isn't just about being with another woman. It's about feeling wanted, feeling admired, feeling powerful. When they get attention from someone new, it feeds their ego. It reassures them that they still have it, that they are still desirable, that they are still in control. But here's the harsh reality. When a man relies on external validation to feel worthy, he will never be satisfied. No amount of attention will be enough. No relationship will ever fulfill him. Because the real issue isn't outside of him, it's inside. Psychology tells us that people who constantly seek validation suffer from low self-esteem masked as confidence. They don't believe in their own worth, so they need constant reminders from others to feel valuable. The moment that validation disappears, they feel empty. And that's when the cycle begins. The truth is, most men don't cheat because they're missing something in their relationship. They cheat because they're missing something within themselves. They use affairs as a way to escape their own insecurities. A man who cheats isn't proving his strength, he's exposing his weakness. But here's something even more dangerous. Validation can become an addiction. Just like drugs, alcohol, or gambling, the rush of feeling desired can be intoxicating. It gives a temporary high, a momentary thrill. But just like any addiction, the high fades. And when it does, the man is left craving more. This is why some men cheat repeatedly, even when they risk craving everything. Their brain is chasing a dopamine rush, and logic takes a back seat. In those moments, they don't think about consequences. They don't think about the pain they will cause. They only think about the next hit of validation, the next person who will make them feel important, even if it's only for a night. But here's the truth that no one wants to admit. Real validation doesn't come from others. It comes from within. A man who truly knows his worth doesn't need multiple women to prove it. He doesn't need to betray the one who loves him just to feel powerful. Because real power isn't in seeking validation. Real power is in self-control. A man who constantly needs outside approval is a man who is never free. He is trapped by his own insecurities, living for the opinions of others instead of standing firm in his own value. And a man like that will always be a slave to his desires, no matter how successful he appears on the outside. So, what's the lesson here? If a man can't find fulfillment within himself, no relationship will ever be enough for him. If he constantly needs attention to feel worthy, then no matter how much you love him, respect him, or support him, he will always crave more. Not because you aren't enough, but because he isn't enough for himself. But here's the good news. Real men don't seek validation, they create it. They don't need constant attention to feel valuable because they know their worth. They don't chase temporary pleasure because they understand real strength comes from discipline. At the end of the day, the difference between a weak man and a strong man isn't in how many options he has. It's in how he chooses. A weak man follows temptation. A strong man masters himself. And that's the kind of man who truly wins in life. Men are often seen as strong, confident, and in control. Society teaches them to be providers, to lead, to protect. But there's one thing most men are never taught: how to handle deep emotional vulnerability. This is one of the hidden reasons why men cheat. It's not just about seeking validation, it's about avoiding emotional depth. For many men, opening up emotionally feels uncomfortable. It requires honesty, it requires facing fears, insecurities, and past wounds. And most importantly, it requires trusting someone enough to be fully seen. But vulnerability feels like weakness to a man who was never taught that it's safe to express emotions. So when a relationship starts getting too deep, when true intimacy begins to form, many men subconsciously panic. They feel exposed. They feel like they're losing control. And instead of facing those emotions, they run. But here's the problem. They don't leave the relationship physically, they leave it emotionally. And this is where cheating begins. Instead of dealing with the discomfort of real emotional connection, some men create distance. They seek something shallow, something that doesn't require emotional depth. They turn to another woman, not because she's better, but because she's easier, she's new, she's temporary. And most importantly, she doesn't expect him to be emotionally available. This isn't about love. It's about emotional escape. Psychologists call this avoidant attachment. It's when a person fears emotional closeness and intimacy, so they subconsciously sabotage it. They crave connection, but the moment it starts feeling too real, they push it away. Not because they don't want love, but because deep down, they don't believe they can handle it. This is why some men cheat even when they have an amazing partner. The problem isn't the relationship. The problem is his inability to handle true emotional connection. But here's what most people don't realize. Cheating doesn't solve this problem. It only makes it worse. Because after the thrill fades, after the temporary excitement is gone, the man is left with the same fears, the same insecurities, and now the guilt of what he's done. He thought cheating would make him feel free, but instead it leaves him trapped. Because no matter how many times he runs, he will always be running from himself. True emotional strength doesn't come from avoiding intimacy. It comes from embracing it. It comes from standing in the discomfort of vulnerability and saying, I will not run from this. I will not sabotage something real for something temporary. A man who can face his own emotions is a man who can truly love. A man who can handle emotional depth is a man who doesn't need to cheat because he's strong enough to stay present, to stay committed, and to handle the weight of real connection. The strongest men aren't the ones with the most options. They're the ones who have the courage to be fully seen, fully known, and still stand firm in who they are. That is real strength. That is real power. For some men, cheating isn't just about validation or escaping emotional depth. It's about something even deeper, power. Power is one of the strongest human desires. The ability to control, to dominate, to influence. This is what fuels ambition, success, and leadership. But when a man lacks true power within himself, he seeks it in unhealthy ways. He starts using relationships as a battlefield for control. Cheating for some men is not just an act of betrayal, it's a silent statement. A way of saying, I am in control, I decide, I have options. It becomes a power move, a way to assert dominance not only over their partner, but over their own insecurities. But here's the irony. Real power isn't found in having more choices. Real power is found in making the right choice. A man who cheats because he thinks it makes him more powerful is actually proving the opposite. He is proving that he is controlled by his impulses, his fears, and his ego. He is proving that he does not lead his own life. His desires do. Psychology tells us that people who feel powerless in one area of life often try to compensate in another. A man who feels small in his career, in his self-worth, or in his personal identity may seek control in relationships as a way to feel strong again. He convinces himself that having multiple women makes him powerful, that keeping secrets makes him untouchable, that getting away with things makes him the one in control. But deep down, he knows the truth. Because real strength isn't in deception, it's in discipline. Real men don't seek power through betrayal. They seek power through self-mastery, through choosing integrity over impulse, through proving to themselves that they don't need to chase momentary highs to feel like a man. A man who constantly needs to prove his power is a man who has none. Because true power doesn't beg for attention, it doesn't need validation, it doesn't look for an escape. It stands firm. It leads with honor. It controls itself before trying to control others. Cheating is an illusion of power, a false sense of control, a moment of dominance that leads to a lifetime of weakness. Because the strongest men, the ones who truly lead, who truly inspire, who truly command respect, are not the ones with the most women. They are the ones with the most self-control. A man who cannot master his desires will always be a slave to them, but a man who can, he doesn't just win in relationships, he wins in life. Cheating doesn't just happen, it builds. It starts with a thought, a temptation, a small boundary crossed, but after the act something powerful happens. Guilt. Guilt is a natural response. It's the mind's way of saying, this wasn't right. It's proof that a person still has a conscience, still knows the difference between right and wrong. And in that moment, a man has two choices: face the guilt or justify the action. For some, guilt becomes unbearable. It weighs on their conscience, makes them restless, fills them with regret. But instead of taking responsibility, they do something else. They start creating excuses. They shift the blame. They tell themselves things like, it's not my fault. My partner wasn't giving me enough attention. I didn't plan for this to happen, it just did. Everyone makes mistakes. It's not a big deal. At least I didn't get caught. Justification is a coping mechanism. It helps a man silence the guilt so he doesn't have to face the truth. The truth that he made a choice. The truth that no one forced him. The truth that he betrayed not just someone else, but himself. But here's the danger. The more a man justifies his actions, the easier it becomes to repeat them. This is how cheating turns from a one-time mistake into a pattern. The brain starts rewiring itself. The voice of guilt gets quieter and the voice of justification gets louder. The first time, it feels wrong. The second time, it feels easier. By the third time, it starts to feel normal. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. It's the mental discomfort that comes from acting in a way that goes against your values. And instead of changing the behavior, many people change their mindset instead. They convince themselves that what they did wasn't so bad. They reshape their beliefs to match their actions instead of reshaping their actions to match their beliefs. This is why some men can cheat for years without guilt. It's not because they don't know it's wrong, it's because they've trained themselves to believe it's acceptable. But here's the truth. Deep down, they always know. Because no matter how much a man lies to himself, his subconscious remembers. His spirit remembers. And over time, this self-betrayal takes a toll. It shows up as restlessness, as anxiety, as a feeling of never being truly at peace. He may try to suppress it, but the mind has a way of revealing what the heart is trying to ignore. This is why cheating never leads to fulfillment. No matter how many times a man justifies it, there is always a part of him that knows he could have done better. Real strength isn't found in excuses, it's found in accountability. A strong man doesn't justify his mistakes, he owns them. He doesn't silence guilt, he learns from it. He doesn't keep making the same choices, he grows. A man who can't be honest with himself will never be truly free. But a man who can, that's the kind of man who rises above temptation. That's the kind of man who builds a life, a relationship, and a future that he never has to run from. Cheating isn't always about love or even about physical attraction. Sometimes it's about something much deeper, the thrill of the chase. For some men, the excitement of pursuing someone new becomes an addiction. The anticipation, the secrecy, the adrenaline, it creates a high, a rush, a feeling of power. And just like any addiction, once they experience it, they crave it again. This isn't just a habit, it's a psychological pattern. The brain releases dopamine, the same chemical responsible for pleasure, motivation, and reward. It's the same reason people get addicted to gambling, to social media, to anything that gives them a quick and intense feeling of satisfaction. But here's where the problem starts. The high never lasts. After the chase is over, after the excitement fades, reality sets in. The thrill that once felt so intoxicating turns into emptiness. And what does the mind do when it feels empty? It looks for the next high, the next distraction, the next chase. This is why some men can't stop cheating even when they want to. They are no longer in control. Their impulses are. Their need for excitement overpowers their ability to stay loyal. They have conditioned their minds to associate love with temporary pleasure rather than lasting connection. And here's the most dangerous part. The more they chase, the less they feel. Because when a man jumps from one woman to another, he stops forming real emotional bonds. He loses his ability to connect deeply. He trains his heart to detach, to avoid, to escape. And over time, he finds himself in a place where nothing feels fulfilling anymore. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. It means that when you constantly chase new experiences, your brain stops appreciating what you already have. The excitement of something new only lasts for a moment before it becomes normal, and then the cycle starts again. This is why men who cheat often find themselves in an endless loop. They think the next woman will make them happy, the next thrill will be different, but in reality, they are just running in circles, trying to fill a void that can be filled with temporary pleasure. Because real happiness doesn't come from chasing, it comes from building. A man who is truly strong, truly disciplined, understands this. He knows that real fulfillment comes from creating something deep, lasting, and meaningful. He knows that love is not found in the endless search for more. It's found in the commitment to something real. The man who can resist the chase is the man who truly wins, because he doesn't settle for momentary highs. He chooses something greater, something stronger, something that lasts. Some men cheat not because they lack love, but because they fear it. They fear the depth, the vulnerability, the raw honesty that true emotional intimacy demands. Emotional intimacy is powerful. It requires a man to be open, to be seen, to be understood beyond just his strengths, but also in his weaknesses. And for some, that is terrifying, because being truly known means there is nowhere to hide, no mask to wear, no illusion to maintain. A man who fears emotional intimacy often prefers surface-level connections. He enjoys affection, but only on his terms. He desires closeness, but only to a certain point. And the moment a relationship starts demanding more, the moment it requires true vulnerability, he pulls away. This is when cheating becomes an escape, not from a relationship, but from depth. For him, cheating is easier than opening up. It's easier than admitting his fears, his insecurities, his emotional wounds. Instead of facing his discomfort, he looks for a distraction. Instead of confronting his emotions, he numbs them with the temporary rush of someone new. Psychologists call this avoidant attachment. It's when a person struggles to fully connect because they associate closeness with loss of control. They believe that if they let someone in too much, they will either be hurt or lose their independence. So they keep people at a distance, not through words, but through actions. But here's the truth. A man who cannot handle emotional intimacy is a man who is running from himself. Because real strength isn't found in avoiding connection, it's found in embracing it, in standing firm in the discomfort of vulnerability, in having the courage to be seen completely and still choosing to stay. A man who cheats out of fear of emotional intimacy isn't looking for more love, he's avoiding real love. Because real love isn't just passion and excitement, it's depth, it's honesty. It's allowing yourself to be known fully and still choosing to commit. A strong man understands this. He knows that true power doesn't come from escaping. It comes from facing the discomfort of being vulnerable, facing the fear of being truly seen, facing the reality that the only way to build something real is to stay, to open up, and to trust. A man who cannot handle intimacy will always run, but a man who chooses to face it, he doesn't just become better in relationships, he becomes stronger in life. For some men, cheating is not about love, it's not about attraction, it's about control. There is a deep psychological connection between power and infidelity. Some men cheat because it makes them feel dominant. It gives them a sense of superiority, an illusion that they are in control. They see relationships as a game where they must always be in the winning position. But here's the truth. A man who seeks control through betrayal is actually controlled by his own insecurity. The need to dominate in a relationship often comes from a place of fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being emotionally vulnerable, fear of not being enough. And instead of facing these fears, he tries to overpower them by making himself feel untouchable. He convinces himself that if he has more options, if he keeps people at a distance, he cannot be hurt. But this is not strength. This is weakness disguised as power. Because a truly powerful man does not need to manipulate or deceive to feel strong. He does not measure his worth by how many hearts he can control. Real power is not found in how many women desire you. It's found in how deeply you can commit to one. But the man who cheats to feel powerful does not see this. His mindset is rooted in scarcity. He believes that if he does not take advantage of every opportunity, he will be missing out. He operates from fear, not abundance. And the worst part, he never feels satisfied. Because no matter how many people he manipulates, no matter how much control he thinks he has, he is never at peace. Power gained through deception is an illusion. It disappears the moment he is alone with himself. When the room is quiet, when there's no distraction, when he is forced to face the emptiness he has been running from. A man who seeks power through cheating is a man who has already lost control, not over others, but over himself. True power is not found in deception. It is found in integrity, in standing firm in your values, in proving that you do not need to betray to feel strong. A real man does not chase power by breaking trust. He builds power by earning it. Because in the end, the greatest strength is not in how many people you can deceive, but in how many people you can inspire through your loyalty, your truth, and your commitment. Some men don't cheat because they want to win. They cheat because deep down they expect to lose. This is the mindset of self-sabotage. The unconscious belief that they don't deserve happiness, that they don't deserve loyalty, that something good will eventually be ruined, so they destroy it first. Psychologists call this self-fulfilling prophecy. When a person secretly believes that they are not worthy of something, they find ways to prove themselves right. If a man believes he is not meant for a healthy, committed relationship, he will create situations that ensure it never lasts. And one of the fastest ways to do that? Cheating. This mindset often comes from childhood experiences, from past betrayals, from moments where love felt unsafe or temporary. If a man grew up watching relationships fall apart, if he saw loyalty being broken over and over again, he may have internalized the belief that this is how love works, that trust is a lie, that no matter how good something seems, it will eventually be destroyed. And when a person believes that, they act accordingly. They start pushing people away, even the ones they love. They test boundaries. They make reckless choices. Not because they don't care, but because they are afraid to hope, afraid to believe in something real. Because if they let themselves believe and then it fails, the pain will be too much to handle, so they break it first. They ruin what they have before it can ruin them. But here's what they don't realize. This is not protection. This is self-destruction. Because in trying to avoid pain, they create more pain. In trying to stay in control, they lose the one thing that could have actually made them happy. And in the end, they prove themselves right, not because love is destined to fail, but because they never gave it a real chance. A man stuck in self-sabotage will always find a reason to run, always find an excuse to destroy something before it gets too real. But a strong man, a man who refuses to be a victim of his past, he does the opposite. He chooses to believe in something greater. He understands that love, real love, is not about guarantees. It's about courage. The courage to trust, the courage to stay, the courage to break free from the old patterns that no longer serve him. Because the man who can overcome his own self-sabotage is the man who finally learns how to win, not just in relationships, but in life. Some men don't cheat because they are unhappy. They cheat because of the thrill, the rush of doing something they know they shouldn't, the excitement of crossing a line, of breaking a rule, of chasing what is forbidden. Psychologists call this the forbidden fruit effect. The idea that when something is off limits, it becomes more desirable. The moment a man is told he cannot have something, his mind convinces him he needs it even more. Not because it's better, but because it's out of reach. And for some, that thrill is addictive. They crave the danger, the risk, the feeling of getting away with something. It gives them a false sense of power, an illusion that they are untouchable. They mistake adrenaline for happiness, excitement for fulfillment. But the truth? It's all temporary. Because what happens when the chase is over? When the forbidden becomes familiar? When the excitement fades and reality sets in? The answer is always the same. They feel empty, because it was never about the other person. It was never about love. It was never about connection. It was about escaping boredom, escaping routine, escaping themselves. But here's the harsh truth. A man who constantly needs the thrill of the forbidden is a man who is running from his own emptiness. Because real happiness isn't found in chasing highs. It's found in building depth, in learning to appreciate what you have instead of always looking for something new. A strong man knows this. He understands that lasting fulfillment isn't about reckless excitement. It's about purpose. It's about choosing depth over distraction, stability over chaos, building something real instead of constantly searching for something temporary. Because in the end, The man who chases the forbidden will always end up lost, but the man who values what he has, he will always win. Some men don't cheat because they don't love their partner. They cheat because they are afraid of what true intimacy demands. Most people think intimacy is about physical closeness, but real intimacy is much deeper. It's about emotional vulnerability. It's about letting someone see you fully, without the mask, without the act, without the ego. And for many men, this is terrifying because true intimacy requires more than attraction. It requires honesty. It requires trust. It requires showing your weaknesses, your fears, your flaws, without hiding. And for someone who has spent their whole life avoiding these things, it feels like a trap. So instead of embracing intimacy, they sabotage it, they create distance, they push away the person who gets too close. And one of the easiest ways to do this? Cheating. It's not about finding someone better, it's about creating an escape, a way to avoid the depth that real love requires. Because if they can keep things shallow, if they can keep love at a safe distance, they never have to confront their own fears. But here's the truth. A man who runs from intimacy is a man who is afraid of himself. Because when someone truly loves you, they don't just see your best, they see everything. They see the wounds you've tried to hide, the insecurities you've buried, the parts of yourself you don't even want to admit exist. And if a man has never learned how to face these things, if he has never done the inner work to understand himself, he will see intimacy as a threat. He will mistake deep connection for loss of control. But real strength is not in running. Real strength is in staying. It's in allowing yourself to be seen fully and completely without fear. It's in choosing depth over distraction, vulnerability over avoidance. It's in understanding that true love is not about perfection. It's about honesty. Because a man who can embrace true intimacy is a man who is truly free. Free from fear, free from the past, free from the need to run. And that kind of freedom, it is the only thing that lasts. Some men don't cheat because they lack love. They cheat because they crave control. Power is one of the deepest human desires. It's wired into the brain. The need to feel strong, the need to feel important, the need to feel like you are in charge. And for some men, relationships make them feel powerless. They fear commitment because commitment requires equality. It requires compromise. It requires putting someone else's needs on the same level as your own. And for a man who ties his self-worth to dominance, this feels like losing control. So what does he do? He cheats. Not always because he wants someone else, but because it gives him a false sense of power. Cheating becomes a secret weapon, a way to feel one step ahead, a way to keep control in a relationship without ever admitting weakness, a way to manipulate emotions while pretending to be unaffected. Because to him, power is more important than love. Winning is more important than loyalty. But here's the irony. A man who cheats to feel powerful is actually weak. Because true strength doesn't come from deception. It doesn't come from playing mind games. It doesn't come from hurting others just to feel superior. That is not power. That is fear, disguised as control. A truly powerful man doesn't need to cheat to feel important. He doesn't need to break trust just to prove he has control. Real power comes from discipline, from knowing you can do something but choosing not to, from valuing loyalty over ego, from leading with integrity instead of manipulation. Because the man who cheats to feel powerful will always be chasing something outside of himself. He will always need validation from someone new. He will always be searching for the next high, the next thrill, the next illusion of control. But the man who builds his power from within, he doesn't need to chase anything. He is already enough. And that kind of power, it never fades. Some men don't cheat because they are unhappy in their relationship. They cheat because they are addicted to validation. Validation is a powerful drug. It feeds the ego. It makes you feel important, desired, and admired. And for some men, that feeling is more addictive than love itself. They don't cheat because they don't love their partner. They cheat because they love the feeling of being wanted. The thrill of someone new looking at them with admiration, the excitement of proving they are still desirable, the rush of knowing they can attract attention. But here's the truth. A man who constantly seeks validation is a man who doesn't truly know his own worth. Because when you know your value, you don't need to chase compliments. You don't need to prove yourself to every new person you meet. You don't need to collect attention like trophies. But when a man's self-worth is fragile, when he depends on outside approval to feel good about himself, he becomes a slave to validation. He starts believing that his worth is measured by how many people desire him. So he cheats, not because he's missing something in his relationship, but because he's missing something in himself. And the saddest part? Validation is never enough. No matter how much attention he gets, no matter how many people admire him, the feeling always fades, the thrill always wears off, the emptiness always returns, because external validation is like a drug. It gives a temporary high, but never true fulfillment. It leaves you constantly searching, constantly needing more, constantly feeling like something is missing. But real confidence, real self-worth, that doesn't come from others. It comes from within. A man who is truly secure in himself doesn't need to cheat to feel valuable. He doesn't need attention from strangers to feel worthy. He knows who he is, and that is enough. Because the greatest validation doesn't come from others. It comes from self-respect. And that is something no one can take away. Some men don't cheat because they lack attraction to their partner. They cheat because they are afraid of emotional intimacy. To truly connect with someone is to be vulnerable. It requires honesty. It requires opening up about fears, insecurities, and weaknesses. And for many men, that is terrifying. They have been conditioned to believe that emotions are a sign of weakness, that being too open makes them less of a man, that showing feelings will make them lose power. So instead of facing intimacy, they run from it. Cheating becomes an escape, a way to avoid emotional depth, a way to keep relationships surface level so they never have to expose their true self. Because the deeper the connection, the greater the risk of rejection, the risk of being hurt, the risk of feeling unworthy. So instead of leaning into love, they sabotage it. They seek temporary connections that don't require vulnerability. They choose physical pleasure over emotional connection because it feels safer, because it keeps them in control. But here's the truth. A man who fears emotional intimacy is a man who has not yet faced himself. Because true strength is not in hiding emotions, it's in embracing them. True power is not in running from connection, it's in building it. A man who cheats to avoid intimacy is not protecting himself. He is imprisoning himself. He is creating a cycle where no relationship ever feels enough, because no relationship is truly real. Because real love requires courage, the courage to be seen, the courage to be known, the courage to let someone in fully and completely. And a man who learns to embrace emotional intimacy, he no longer needs to cheat, because he is no longer running. He is no longer hiding. He is finally free to experience love, not as a game, not as a conquest, but as something real, something lasting, something worth fighting for. Some men don't cheat because they are unhappy. They cheat because they confuse commitment with losing their freedom. They see a relationship as a cage, a place where their choices are limited, their independence is gone, and their world shrinks. They believe that loyalty means sacrifice, that being with one person forever means giving up excitement, variety, and new experiences. So they rebel. They chase affairs, thinking they are reclaiming control, thinking they are proving to themselves that they still have options, that they are still free. But here's the truth. Cheating is not freedom. It's an illusion. Because a man who cheats is not in control. He's running from responsibility, running from emotional depth, running from the work it takes to build something real. True freedom is not in avoiding commitment. True freedom is in choosing it. Because a man who is truly free does not need to prove it. He does not need to betray the person who trusts him just to feel powerful. He does not need to break something valuable just to remind himself he still has options. A weak man avoids commitment because he fears losing himself. A strong man embraces commitment because he knows who he is. Cheating does not make a man powerful. It does not make him more attractive, more dominant, or more successful. It reveals his insecurity, his fear, his inability to control his own desires. Because real strength is in discipline, the ability to say no to temptation, the ability to value what you have, the ability to build something that lasts instead of chasing things that disappear. A man who believes commitment is a prison has already locked himself inside his own mind. He will always run, always search, always feel like something is missing. Because the problem is not the relationship, the problem is him. But a man who understands the power of loyalty, the power of dedication, he doesn't see commitment as a limitation. He sees it as the foundation of something greater, something that brings peace instead of chaos, something that builds a future instead of destroying it. Because in the end, a man's true freedom is not in how many options he has, it's in how wisely he chooses.